My name's Frank Dalton, and I've lived on this ranch for over 30 years. My land stretches over 200 acres of Texas soil, open fields, rolling fences, and the kind of sunrise that makes a man feel alive. My wife and I built our home here long before the housing development next door ever existed. That was before the HOA showed up. When those shiny suburban homes started popping up just over the hill, I knew my peace and quiet wouldn't last forever. But I never expected that one day they'd dig through my property, my private land, like they owned it. It started one morning when I woke up to the roar of heavy machinery. Backhoes, excavators, orange cones. The kind of noise that doesn't belong on a quiet ranch. I walked outside and saw a crew of construction workers carving a trench right through my pasture. "What in God's name are you doing?" I shouted. One of the workers looked up, shrugged, and said, "We're laying a water pipeline for the Willow Creek HOA." I froze. The HOA. The same people who'd been complaining about my unpainted barn and non-compliant fencing, even though I wasn't even part of their community? That's when Karen Marshall, the head of the HOA, strutted toward me. Pink blouse, clipboard, sunglasses that probably cost more than my tractor. She pointed at the trench like she was queen of the world. "Mr. Dalton, please stay clear of the work area," she said in a sharp tone. "This is HOA business." I blinked. "This is my land, lady." She smirked. "Not according to the new community expansion plan. The board approved an easement for this area." "An easement?" I laughed. "You think a piece of paper lets you dig up my ranch without my consent?" She leaned closer, whispering with that condescending tone only people like her have. "Don't step on the pipe, old man. You could get hurt." That line burned into me like a brand. I went back to my house, furious. I dug through every document I owned, every boundary record, every deed. And sure enough, their so-called easement didn't cover a single inch of my land. They'd trespassed. The next morning, I called the county office, the sheriff, even a lawyer. But it turns out, the HOA had already filed some emergency infrastructure approval. Bureaucratic nonsense. It would take months to undo. Meanwhile, they kept digging. Pipes stretched through my ranch like scars, cutting through soil I'd worked with my own hands for decades. My cattle were restless, my fences were torn up, and Karen walked around giving orders like she was directing an army. For a week, I stewed in silence. But the thing about ranchers? We don't forget. We don't forgive easy. That's when I came up with an idea, a quiet kind of revenge. You see, the HOA's shiny new pipeline wasn't pulling water from the city supply. It came from a small natural spring a few miles up the ridge. I knew that spring well. It flowed downhill through several properties before reaching my lower fields. The HOA's engineers must have assumed it was all public land. They assumed wrong. That spring's source sat on an old lot, one that had been abandoned for years. And after a quick check at the county clerk's office, I discovered something incredible. It was for sale. Dirt cheap. I bought it the very next morning. A week later, I installed a steel gate and a water control valve right at the springhead. My own private setup. Perfectly legal. I even hired a local plumber to help me divert the flow slightly into a new reservoir tank. Then, one bright Monday morning, I turned the valve shut. Within 2 days, the HOA's brand new lawns started browning. Sprinklers sputtered dry. The fancy fountains in their entrances stopped mid-spout. By the weekend, the whole subdivision looked like a desert. I sat on my porch drinking coffee, watching Karen storm up my driveway in her SUV. Dust clouds trailing behind her like a fury from hell. She jumped out and started yelling before her heels even hit the dirt. "What did you do, Frank? Our entire neighborhood's out of water." I smiled calmly. "Oh, you mean my water? The one you piped through my land. That spring belongs to the community," she snapped. "Actually," I said, holding up the new deed, "it belongs to me. Bought it fair and square. You want water? You'll have to talk to the owner." Her face went pale. "You can't do that. People have children. Maybe they should have thought about that before trespassing. She threatened lawsuits, called me every name in the book, and even brought a county inspector. But when he checked the paperwork, he simply nodded and said, "Ma'am, looks like Mr. Dalton owns the source. Nothing illegal here." For the next month, the HOA scrambled. They tried to truck in water. They begged the city for emergency access. But everything cost them a fortune. Meanwhile, my ranch thrived. My fields were green, my reservoir full, and for the first time in weeks, peace returned. Then one evening, Karen herself came back, but this time, no sunglasses, no clipboard. Just tired eyes and a quiet voice. "Frank," she said, "the HOA can't afford to keep this up. We made a mistake. What will it take for you to turn the water back on?" I let the silence hang. Then I said, "A written apology. Full compensation for the damage to my property. And you'll tear out every inch of that illegal pipe." She hesitated, then nodded. "Deal." By the next week, construction crews were back, this time, removing every last pipe they'd buried. My ranch was restored, and I got a hefty check for land repair and damages. The morning after, I walked to the spring and slowly turned the valve open again. The water gushed freely down the ridge, sparkling in the sun. Karen waved from her SUV. I nodded back. No words. No anger left. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing justice had run its course. Later that evening, I hung a small sign on my gate. Private property, water source protected by owner. And under it, in smaller letters, "Don't step on the pipe, old man." Every time I read that line, I can't help but smile. Because sometimes, revenge doesn't need fists or shouting, just a little patience and the right piece of land.